Well, g'day everybody. So Wendy writes to me and asks, Mark, how can we keep changing Prime Minister when in places like the USA they keep them for as much as 8 years, even if it's a Donald Trump character? Well, I suppose this is a long discussion, but the key point is that the Prime Minister in Australia, the head of the executive, is actually appointed effectively, well, officially by the Queen, but effectively by the Parliament. Whereas in the USA, the President is elected by the people directly. The Westminster system, as we call it, has three parts to it. There are those who make the laws, or the Parliament, the upper or lower house in our case, or in the case of the USA, the Congress and Senate. So they're the people who make the laws. There's the executive. They're the people who are then meant to implement the laws. That includes our Prime Minister and his or her cabinet, or the President and his or her executive. And the third part of the Westminster system is judiciary. They're the people who are meant to enforce the laws, particularly, well, in particular the court system, the judiciary system. In the USA, there's a very clear separation between those three parts of government. The Congress is separate. The President does not sit in the Congress, for example. The executive is separate, elected directly by the people, or at least the President's elected by the people, and the President then appoints his or her cabinet. And the judiciary is completely separate. In Australia, we have this funny situation which is kind of against the principles of the Westminster system, whereby it's the Parliament who actually appoint the executive. So whereas in the US, the people elect the executive, the President, in our case, it's the Parliament with all the politics associated with that, who go to the Queen, who officially appoints the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, but she only does it at their direction. So all the politics that we observe in the Parliament creates this great uncertainty, this great variability. So if they decide they don't like the Prime Minister anymore, they can change the Prime Minister. In the USA, the Congress, the Parliament, where where a lot of the nonsense occurs, we all watch parliaments from time to time. They have no power to decide who the President is. They do have the power to actually impeach the President, so the Congress can impeach the President saying, this guy needs to go, and then the Senate literally puts the President to trial and finds the President guilty or innocent. But that's a very rare circumstance, and in fact in the history of the entire USA, there's never been a president impeached. The only guy that came close was Nixon, Richard Nixon, who in the end just decided to pull the pin because he knew he was going to be found guilty by the Senate. So even though we have in principle a clear separation of Parliament between the legislature, the Parliament, the upper and lower house in Australia, and the executive, the Prime Minister and his or her ministers, really the separation is not there. So it's created this volatility where the Parliament of the day and the politics within the Parliament can actually rub out the Prime Minister. Have a good weekend.